All right. Well, with my deep breath done, hello and welcome everyone to a Manifesto Akira series, episode 22, part D. Um, it's Josh and Jackie once again going through the last third of Akira, the manga. And this time we have some thoughts and we want to focus on the themes of maybe allegories that we can glean from Akira that may have some real world applications, and just wrap up this story um, with sort of like, well, where do we go from here? Because I think that's how the ending looks. And that last scene adds a bit of hope, or it's a very nice ending, and maybe it's helpful to engage in that in the new year. So yeah, happy New Year, everyone, and I hope you enjoy this episode. I wanted to give everybody maybe a very, very brief, I know I can be long winded, but a brief sort of run through of book five and six. Book five really is the US government infiltrating Neo Tokyo. They're setting off all of these plans, sending in secret agents with bacterial, like, bioweapons that
Yeah,
are
biological weapon. Yeah, biological weapons.
biological weapons to essentially wipe out Tetsuo and whomever is in the path of these toxic chemicals that they're spraying into this war zone of Neo Tokyo. And In book five, Tetsuo goes and does one of the largest feats of the power, breaks open a part of the moon, adds a little Saturn ring around it, and causes the tides to shift. The US government with the Russians, they come through, they try to attack Tetsuo. Tetsuo makes kind of light work of them, but he absorbs their weaponry pretty seamlessly. But it also has a similar effect to the pills, where it kind of just quells some of the overflow of that power. And Kay, who's now been sort of Gundammed, I guess, commandeered by Kyoko, Masaru, and Lady Miyako, and I guess with her youth, acts as a temporary rival to Tetsuo's power, as all of these things are occurring. And then we get into book six, where the big cataclysm happens. Tetsuo's off the rails. The U.S. government is carpet bombing Neo Tokyo. So a lot of things are happening where Kaneda and Joker are combating giant mutant baby Tetsuo as the bombing is happening. Let's see, what am I missing here?
I feel like it's important to like also like just like Tetsuo is like in this his apotheosis has overtaken his control so that like he keeps going back and forth between being overtaken by sheer power to an extent where it's no longer him, and in fact in multiple scenes he'll be like help me Tetsuo and like trying to resist the his own power, and then like he'll be like blinking around to different parts of the world, like to the ship where the international world order is ordering missiles to be fired onto Tokyo and stuff, and he'll be like entwined with all the wires and machinery there and growing into the big mutant baby, and then he'll zip back to like the Olympic Stadium where his home is and battle Canada a little bit, But the point is that he will kind of become this giant mutant baby thing, and then will become this like wired like tentacle monster with like all these different machinery. And then at different times he will also be able to regain control and be like just his own like 15-year-old body, but like and then he's like super omnipotent almost. But then the power will come back and be too much and start to try to incorporate whoever it encounters. I just feel like it's important to note the types of monstrosity that he is wielding and that he's being wielded by as this continues to escalate.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that they mentioned that his personality is also not in his control at times when he's transforming and teleporting around. Yeah, I like that. I appreciate that, and also there's maybe the final scene, and then we can get into some of the nuances. Is or the penultimate conflict is two Akira phenomena, as they call it, the big explosions. If you've seen Dragon Ball Z, this is like a beam struggle where the two mega energy balls are colliding with each other. And my favorite scene in the entire series is when you can see the mutant parts and tentacles get warped to what's like a neutron star sort of thing, this infinitely dense black hole. These two black holes are colliding, and they in some ways neutralize, with Kaneda in the middle and Kei getting him out of the energy that is sort of the life stream that we've been describing as the Akira power. And so maybe that's a good place to just like settle it. There's a lot of stuff that happens between all of these moments, but once that big blank happens, we then come back to Neo Tokyo, and in the aftermath with everybody who survived this incredible explosion of energy, with Kaneda and Kei riding with their new gang, and also their spiritual gang into the Neo Tokyo skyline under the banner of the Great Tokyo Empire. So yeah, that's kind of how book 5 and 6 end in brief. So sorry for the long-windedness again, but I was trying to get a lot in there.
Yeah, it's a huge. I mean, it's not. I feel like a lot of these books is just like epic battles of all kinds. But and it's kind of like a return to the pace of books 1 and 2, where like you get like all these different factions that are all frantically working towards the same end goal. In the books 1 and 2, it was everybody's working towards Akira, where like Tetsuo is trying to go like release Akira, and everyone's rushing towards the same place to try to either prevent that from happening or like or do whatever they want to do with it. It's a similar situation in books, and then so 1 and 2, the pace is that everyone's hustling towards the same goal, and then some sort of like cataclysm happens that renders it all kind of meaningless or futile. In the same way, I think that we see the same kind of pace and blueprint play out in books 5 and 6, but this time everyone's trying to eliminate Tetsuo, and everybody, like all the different factions, including this international world order ship that has like Russian, American collaborators. It has like one of the it has a llama in it, like a Dalai Lama type person. All these different like world leaders who are also trying to conspire to eliminate Tetsuo. Everyone has these different machinations that they're trying to, like, we have the different the like Navy SEALs or whatever who have those bioweapons. We have every different faction is trying to get rid of Tetsuo in one way or another. So that's kind of the basic what happens for the bulk of these books. But I wanted to talk about, I think that there's like a lot of entanglements that we could talk about like, okay, what does it mean that how the US is represented in this admiral on this ship, sending these like missiles only to bomb all of Tokyo, etc. But then there's also, I think that what's really interesting and kind of one of the most provocative and like kind of hopeful moments, because I was telling Josh that this feels like a really hopeful narrative to go into the new like 2025 with. When I finished it like a couple days ago on like the 30th of 2024, I was like, damn, like the ending like really made me feel like energized and like, you know, there's hope or something. And so like I wanted to maybe like, could we like sketch out the ending in a little bit more detail, maybe like basically, so what happens during this white light explosion? Like, who is spared and who is not, and what is that about? Like, because in the movie too, it's a little bit confusing, like who actually survives this and how that works.
Yeah, and this is where my speculation kind of has to run wild, because at a certain point, you know that in these explosions, just countless people, like innocent bystanders, are getting wiped out. Because, you know, referencing the atomic bomb, like these big flashes that destroy everything in its path and creates a wasteland, you get the sense that the only people that can survive these things are subsumed within the energies or whatever, that stream that gives Akira and Tetsuo and all of the children their powers, right? And one of the things that I think that bonds them is their connection. Like somehow their spiritual energy protects them from being absolutely obliterated by the energies that they're experiencing. So if we go
Mm-hmm.
back to the movie when Kaori is inside of Tetsuo, this is why I think the movie is good to watch before you read the book, is because when Kaori's inside of Tetsuo and she's dying, right, gets crushed by him. That doesn't happen in this book. She sort of dies in his lap, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, she gets shot by the great Tokyo Empire forces just for no real reason, and then like you know, and it's actually a really interesting, fraught love thing because you realize that there actually was like a genuine tenderness that was kind of circuiting between her and Tetsuo, despite the fact that it was a forced thing at first, like. And you know, that's one of the people that
Mhm.
Tetsuo really starts. Is like really, there's scenes of him mourning her, but anyway, like that is definitely different between the movie and the book. Is that the movie has, well, he doesn't want to crush her, but it's like this power beyond his control crushes her in the movie, and then in the book
Right.
it's like someone wholly other than him kills her, and then he's like he mourns her, and yeah.
Yeah, like I think to stay on that point a little bit, I think not only does it show like a better or a more interesting dynamic between Tetsuo and Carrie, I also think that her trying to warn Tetsuo, like because
Mm-hmm.
the new Tokyo or Great Tokyo Empire is trying to do away with Tetsuo because he poses a threat to their futures.
Yeah,
The guy.
it's a coup d'état. It's even within the Great Tokyo Empire, who he was leading. Even they decide that he
Mhm.
needs to go.
Right. And that like care also I think grounds Tetsuo, right? Like I get the sense that Tetsuo's able to maintain senses of his personality because he of all of the emotions and things that tie him into his physical form. I have a theory about how the powers work in the sense that like even though you're connected to the grand stream of energy, your finite physical being is kind of that temporality is what gives it shape. Like it's constantly what is Lady Miyako says that the when he's losing his personality and losing himself and it keeps absorbing all the wires and he at some point becomes parts of the ships and things like that. It's because it's trying to become a
Mm-hmm.
bigger vessel,
Right.
which I think the fear is that it will consume the world. Like the world will become a vessel for this Akira thing, and everybody and all life ends with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
but
Right.
going back to that last sort of scene where we have Kaneda who's confronting Tetsuo in his face and is now sort of subsumed within the baby form of the baby monstrosity
Right. Right.
Tetsuo.
The monster is like consumed. Yeah, Kaneda.
Right. The monsters consume Kandida, and K is floating above the cataclysm as it's happening, right? This is after she has gone up to the soul and launched a beam at Tetsuo because
Yeah, the soul being a giant like space laser.
and what you'll have to recognize is that anytime Tetsuo is damaged by like a large amount of power, the
Right.
Akira monstrosity comes out. Like it's sort of
Yeah,
bringing
exactly.
out that demon. Yeah.
Right, right.
And
He'll
so
finally regain control, and then like the U.S. will fire a missile at him, and then like boom, he is back to this like monster that can't be controlled even by him, and he usually
Mhm.
gets fueled and like stronger by these attacks.
Exactly. And at this point, we have to take into account that Akira, the boy, has been shot, right? As well, in sort of like this in tandem with this sort of big attack against Tetsuo. So Akira's been shot. So has Tetsuo been shot by this giant space laser with Lady Miyako kind of like, holding her ground, the demon force of Tetsuo. So Akira's lying on the ground bleeding. Both of them are gravely wounded, Akira and Tetsuo. And so that catalyzes these two separate explosions. Masaru, Takashi, Kyoko, they come and join Akira as he's sort of, dying, and he becomes a spiritual form of himself. He then, as Tetsuo's launching his cataclysmic attack that kind of has not a whole lot of targeting goals, right? Because he's lost his personality and he's kind of like all of his emotions are getting away from him, right? He's ripping apart. Akira is kind of the yin yang concept, right? Is at peace. He's with all of his friends again. He's outside of the stream, but he's able to manipulate the stream to launch another blast to counteract Tetsuo's blast. The two interact, and Kaneda is in between the two blasts. K is in a spectral form, trying to call Kaneda out of the like two energy blast, while Kaneda is going through, like, he's within the stream at this point. He can see all of Tetsuo's
It's
experiences.
just it's just like such a. It actually kind of sounds so insane to try to describe what exactly is happening.
It really
Um,
does, yeah.
yeah,
I would say what's generally happening is, if you think of this as another mass extinction event for Neo Tokyo, a bunch of people are dying because of Tetsuo's reaction to another massive attack. Akira, also like now deceased, is charging up and resonating with Tetsuo's massive attack and creating one of his own. These two huge explosions in some ways cancel each other out. And they cancel each other out in that they both get transported into the spiritual stream side of things
the
versus
spiritual
the
worlds. They blip into
right.
the spiritual world as opposed to getting it all exploded into the real world.
Yes, exactly. Like they get sucked into the stream,
Hmm.
the meta stream, rather than the stream as it flows through conduits on Earth, right?
Indeed.
And Kaneda happens to be in the middle of this explosion for most of it and
Hmm.
is at risk of being sucked into the stream himself. But as he's in the middle of it, he's able to witness and see the cognitive activity of Tetsuo and how it's interacting with the cosmic activity of the stream through Tetsuo.
Totally.
Before that, as that ends, Kei is able to wrench Kaneda out of that moment, that huge explosion, to not be sucked into the stream, but rather remain on Earth, but also remain relatively unscathed by a cosmic explosion. And when we go back to like who survives it, I mean, it's a wasteland now. People are at different distances away from this explosion. in this moment, like as opposed to the moment that happens at the end of book 3, there's no teleporting people to a safe distance away. It's just sort of a major explosion, and by the grace of, the powers that be, you're either in or outside of it. However, I do get the sense that there were people that were closer than in book 3 that survived that maybe shouldn't have.
That does seem to be what's happening. There's like a spiritual world that Akira is blipping into, and Tetsuo as well is being dragged into. That's kind of like a heaven type thing, but it's like almost like a transcendent reality, like an alternate dimension that like, if you have enough force and power, you're able to blip into. And then in that big explosion that is the physical manifestation, on the other side of that, there is... It's strange because it does seem like there are people who... Some people survive and some people don't. And it doesn't seem like it's a purely physical thing about like who... It's not like a blast... It's not just who is within the blast radius that survives or doesn't survive. Like Kaneda would be a perfect example. I mean, like he's in the middle of it, but he survives. So there's honestly, like for me, like... There's a lot to talk about when it comes to what Kaneda sees in the interior of this explosion, in this kind of like black hole, DMT released into your brain, journey into the other worlds, where you journey to the underworld, other world, where you see all the different memories of you and everyone you love splayed out, and you can like contemplate the universe. There's a lot of stuff about Kyoko, the little girl, is like telling him about like how the universe was interested in exploring like manifestations of embodiment that were like way more like powerful and like perfect, and like a next evolution of things, and how evolution isn't just a random process but is also directed by the universe. And there's all this stuff happening. And then we see like Tetsuo and his like primal traumas, and there's this amazing reconciliation spiritually between him and Kaneda, where Kaneda's like, I just wanted to be your friend. And like friendship is super emphasized there. And then in the aftermath of that, Tetsuo is able to like go happily into the consortium of children. There's all these like experimented upon children who are reunified with each other, and they're like back to being kids, able to play together. So there's like all these like beautiful and like psychedelic experiences, memories that are contemplated. So that's worth talking about. But I also think it's very interesting to talk about who is left behind and what that means, because it seems almost like a moment of what do you call it? Rapture, where certain people are able to escape this world into a higher version, but then other people either decide to or are left in its wake. There's this like gigantic explosion, multiple pages of just like cataclysm, and there's like water rushing through the city. There's like buildings being obliterated by the explosion.
Yeah.
But like that's actually it's interesting because there's a bunch of water rushing through, but it doesn't, I don't know, like maybe it's just like the shockwave of this like cataclysmic explosion, And I guess the point is that the explosion itself wasn't that big, but it had like a huge like shock. I don't know what it is, but there's just like a bunch of survivors is what I'm trying to say. It's not like a nuclear bomb where like everyone just dies.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because the shockwave is definitely something that we've experienced multiple times. I know it like references a nuclear bomb, but it isn't quite that type of destruction, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It's not like everything is just evened out. There's buildings still here, they're all being like rushed through with water, like waves of water in the aftermath of this explosion. But there's like a ton of people and buildings still, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, like if we go look at 384, 385, and then 386, I think really gives you an image of what I'm thinking of is that
Right.
if that crease, that middle scene is the epicenter of the explosion,
Mm-hmm.
the reverberating effects of that are also cataclysmic. So
There's like a
there's like
giant explosion in the middle, and then there's like spiraling like wafts of smoke coming out of it.
and so that's got to be terrible winds. Remember the tide is already fucked up because the moon is fucked up, right? Like so
Yeah.
this is like everything that could possibly go wrong has gone wrong in the natural order of things, and these are stragglers from like the city collapsing within itself after facing a huge
Mm-hmm.
explosion, you know.
Yeah.
And I I
I guess that's a
I,
good point. Like there is like definitely a lot of a lot of people do die, but you also, I guess what I'm really trying to say is that like it's also emphasized, for example, on 390, that
mhm.
they're like in 390 we do get like a full page of just shots of anonymous people just who are surviving, and
Yes.
then we go on to see people that we recognize, Chiyoko, Joker, etc., the Colonel. But like there's this, there definitely is, there are pages dedicated to the idea that there's still like burgeoning life even though this stuff just happened.
Yeah, I want to going on to like 394, that top panel where it just looks like a person mourning
Mm.
they're like the
Mm.
deceased. As we're about to go into this hopeful scene of like all the main characters that we know and love from the story being around, um we're witnessing a lot of grief as you're mentioning, right? Maybe the thing that I'm struggling with is even though we can talk about the spiritual connectivity of all of these things and the beauty of the afterlife that Tetsuo, Kaneda, and Akira witnessed and Kei especially were like a part of, um, everyone else is dispossessed by this. Like there, there is a sense that this that maybe if part of the destiny was for these two to meet, the destiny for other people was tragedy.
Hmm.
And I don't know necessarily know what that says, but it
Yeah. I mean, there's like, so like all those ESP children are essentially gone though, which is interesting too. Yeah, like there's this feeling that like the rest of us are left in the wake of this thing, not having been allowed into the gates of heaven, and instead are just left in the depraved world that we inhabit, which is why I kind of bring in this reference to Christian apocalypse, like to this rapture moment. But then in the wake of
100%.
that, there is still, I think, and then what I wanted to really get to is also like the real ending of this narrative and trying to figure out what that means too. We see all these survivors and like there's a lot of grief and there's a lot of like mourning and like just big huge pages of people surviving and making it and mourning and just kind of like looking at the aftermath of this. And then there's like this like sound of helicopters and a big fleet of military people from like the international world order, like UN people probably come flooding in. And there's like lines of people waiting for rations. Everyone's like eating up all the supplies and stuff, and it's like, oh my god, thank God. I will say there's a part where like one of the like Western scientists or whatever is like, Dr. Simmons, you're alive. You're all alive. So like a lot of people did survive is what I'm saying. But I don't know, whatever. We
Mhm.
we can leave that.
No. Yeah, I just don't know
Yeah, I
to
don't know
what
what
end the
exactly what its
survival.
relationship to the
Yeah.
explosion is. Like that's what's kind of confusing. Like, but it is.
Mm.
I guess my point is that like the feeling is that like that there's this bustling world that was left behind by all these children. They went to this like other world, and then in the wake of it, like you were saying, like uh, there's kind of this whole host of people that are left behind.
I think I have maybe a hypothesis to posit here. that we do see all of that grief and all of these people left behind, but maybe the elephant that we haven't quite fully conceptualized is the fact that this huge explosion also means that like the threat of Akira and Tetsuo has disappeared.
Right.
And so there is a new world order
Yeah.
that is more localized and not as connected to this as existential fear of, you know, like a grand unstable explosion coming off
Hmm.
of a
Hmm.
child or a erratic teenager.
Okay, so that's really interesting in the context of what comes next, which is that essentially there's these UN people who are giving out aid and everything, and then we see Kaneda ride on in, and he's like, "Who's in charge? I want to talk to the boss." And he slaps down a big flag that says "Great Tokyo Empire" on it, like handwritten on it, and there's like this whole group of like people there of his like is like biker gang or something, and he basically threatens the UN and is like, "Get the fuck out of here! Like, we'll take your supplies, but get the fuck out! Like, we don't want to see you. And if you come back here again, this is a sovereign nation, and if you come back without being invited, we will attack you." And like the guy's like, "What are you fucking talking about? Like, we're from the Japanese government. Like, we're not invaders." And he's like, this isn't Japan. It's its own thing. You know, this is its own place, and you're not welcome here except for your supplies. So then they're like, "Okay, I guess we'll go then." And then
Yeah.
Kaneda says like, "Akira still lives among us," and him and Kei and the biker gang triumphantly ride off into the sunset. And alongside them are like the ghosts, are like spirits. Seemingly Tetsuo, as like a ghost biker, is also in the gang, you know, riding with them. And we see like these big shots of like the gleaming, if distraught, skyscrapers of Neo Tokyo. And the last panel is like broken pillar with an A on it that doesn't have a circle around it, but it kind of is reminiscent of the anarchist A. But it also it says Akira below it in like bold letters, right? So it's like Akira stands for this like potentially this radical spirit of the people or whatever that is now no longer in actuality a like omniscient force embodied in a child, but it's now potentially a spirit, like a collective spirit of a people that will not be ruled except by themselves. But
Yeah.
so that's like a hopeful moment. That's like holy. That's like what had me like all ready to start 2025 and everything. Like, okay, that's the spirit we should be trying to embody, like the spirit of Akira, and not as like a all powerful child, but as like collectivity. So like that's cool. Like I really do like that idea, and it's also like because it seems like maybe now all the ESP power people are now gone, but like in a way with it isn't the power of Neo Tokyo also gone? Like isn't it true that like what would stop the UN from coming back and like taking over again is the kind of the question that comes up. And then but then so then by the same token though, is it good that there's no longer these individuals that have this massive amount of power? Probably better for the world. So I guess the things I wanted to question are like, what is this ultimate anti-authoritarian zone that's of like hopefulness and of like spiritedness that we see in the wake of all these ESP people ascending? And is it hopeful in its current state? Is the power of Akira with them in like a psychic, like psionic sense? Or is it just kind of this temporary statement that the author ends the book series on as this like, listen, for a few moments they were free, you know, and that's what matters. And for those moments, they may as well be eternal because like you had that moment of autonomy before maybe is the subtext that they will be ultimately dominated by the powers that be next. I don't know. That's kind of the things I wanted to ask you about with this ending.
Yeah. I think you can see it two ways. I think if I could start with the hopeful one or I can start with the very disparaging one. Which would you prefer?
Why don't you start with the hopeful one? You know, I like to end on a bad note.
Yeah, all right. I think if we're just going off of like artistic context and using the text as like a means to try to describe what's happening, I see this. What's left behind by the calamity is a real productive future that they have this autonomous space. They say that Akira still lives among them. That can also be a threat to the boy as a potential weapon or whatever, right? Because in the beginning, no one they tried to hide that Akira existed because there's always Akira as a threat. I know major government powers know that Akira still exists, but for all they're concerned, he's dormant and he's not going to be a risk to anyone. And so in many ways, they have this sort of threat of ambiguity. They have the resources from the government that they might have a potential positive relationship with, right? They're not trying to fight. No one's trying to kill each other anymore. They're just trying to live and survive. And so, looking at this last panel, you can see it as like sort of from the rubble, the metropolis can live again. Like you can see
Right.
like composed buildings like at like the lower part of the panel, listener, is kind of like the speed images that Otomo's really good at showing, and white space, rubble, and then above the rubble you see actual like kind of uniform structures of what I guess is like Neo Tokyo in its prime, but could also be reminiscent of like a Neo Tokyo to come that is more peaceful, that has risen above this cataclysm. And of course, back to the anarchic themes that have sort of permeated throughout the entire series of volumes here. It tries to describe how like anarchy is a viable political science, I guess, because it allows for more liberation and it allows for peace among unlikely friends, or I guess peace among former combatants as they realize as their goals have been realized, right?
Yeah,
Tetsuo.
I also just want to mention here that like this is also a the I mean maybe we missed this in book 5, but like I remember discussing how like oh man like these gangs are fighting amongst each other when they could be rising up against their oppressors. And in this final scene, and in this final couple books, we have in the wake of these apocalypses, we have like true solidarity between these erstwhile like gang rivals. They're now like unified in the same purpose, and that's much more highlighted at the end here, where we see like them kind of riding together. So I just wanted to kind of mention, tie up that kind of thread of this like this lost kind of fighting amongst people of your same class interest versus now we have like that with a unified purpose. But yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say the disparaging angle is exactly what you outlined, right? Is that this is all temporary. That they're existing in like the ambiguity of like a collapsed society that will then be subsumed by the entities like those, like Dr. Simmons and all of those people. There are European powers that are going to come and try to get them, right? Because they're well-known people, they are scientists, etc. They haven't been, from what we know, subsumed into the Great Tokyo Empire. So the powers that be will start to descend on this place, and so they were briefly free, and they briefly saw a glimpse of like a possible world of unity, but then the governments are going to come through. It's going to establish this order. That metropolis that we see is foreboding rather than encouraging, because it is saying like, oh, this cycle is going to begin again.
Right.
Cities will rise up. These biker gangs will be the lowly among them.
Right.
All of their exploits will be warped and rewritten in history, as well as like the idea of Akira being a thing either gets dissolved into myth or gets put, like I'm thinking about that moment in book 5 when the American general saw Tetsuo. He's like, wait, we have the most impenetrable system. No one could have gotten here.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, they wrote context, they wrote a report of Tetsuo getting onto the ship and fucking with everybody and breaking some guy's ribs. And they're like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that accident when he fell down the stairs because no one could get into this structure.
Right. That definitely is
That's
a
what
theme.
I'm.
Like the Western people on these ships, like are like oblivious and impervious to the idea that there would be some kind of like, you know, transcendental, like spiritual element to the realities that they're facing.
Yeah. And yeah, I want to hop on that, but let
That's a
me.
whole other thing, yeah, because it kind
Yeah.
of brings up these questions because we know that I don't know. There's a whole other stuff because we also know that like there's like real world documentation of like U.S. people experimenting with ESP and stuff, and
Mhm.
as well as remote viewing and all these different things. And then there's also this like new documentary series podcast that everyone's talking about like these research done on autistic people to see if they had psychic abilities, which apparently they did, but that's a whole other
Mm.
thing. So like there's a lot of like pertinent relationships to like real world government spooky stuff that has to do with kids and experimentation and psychic powers and everything. The whole can of worms, but okay, yeah. But yeah, the point is that like wouldn't they come back in the vacuum of power that exists now? Why wouldn't they? And I mean, I guess then we kind of come to a place where we're kind of in another colonial moment. Like it's like another pre-colonial moment. Like we reset, and then all of a sudden we kind of have like essentially like a devastated Gaza and a entire world order that is like why would they just let that real estate be, right? I mean, there
Mhm.
are some reasons. For example, it is like very, very difficult to invade a city, even if it is destroyed. Like, you know,
Yeah.
so like you have to completely bomb the thing to shit. And then and then once you do that, it's really hard to make it marketable because then you have to like, you know, somehow make a golf course there or something. So like it's a long process and costly process, but we kind of do have the sense of being reset to this point where okay, now the stakes are really clear. It's like residents of New Tokyo who are trying to like live this mutualistic anti-authoritarian society and the powers of the world that will
Yeah.
probably one way or another worm their way back into like dominating this space and rebuilding this hegemony.
I hope that the pain stops all of a sudden right now and is gone.
Temporary escape being one of the ways that we can like the tactics of guerrilla style warfare are good because you can do an attack and then retreat and you can be economical with the use of your power and your resources both like temporally and also materially. And I feel like the
Mhm.
idea of a temporary autonomous zone is that you can do the same thing with like the way that you experience reality and the way that you share good times with folks and the way that you form community and the way that you exist in reality. And I feel like there's this kind of you can kind of cast these circles, you know, on certain spaces, whether it's a festival or a recently bombed building or a non-industrialized space of some kind, or like a basement. Someone starts playing the guitar. Someone else is like, you know, figures out something that they can cook for people. Somebody figures out a way to make some kind of drug that is like not bad for people or whatever, or not too bad for people. And then
Yeah.
before you know it, you like you're sharing what you have, and you're like you have the spirit of collectivism that you're able to indulge in. That is like the way that we all want to be living, and you're not in the way that you can't like continue to lead a sustained war, a sustained conflict, a sustained like battle against a much larger enemy. You can't sustain a prolonged autonomous zone, but you can figure out little opportunities to do so. And I feel like they kind of ripple out into eternity because like if it was possible, just because you did it as opposed to not doing it. You had it as opposed to not ever having had it. And that kind of proves that it's possible, and I don't know, just kind of leaves its mark on the rest of reality, I feel like.
Yeah, and that indelible mark that you're mentioning, I saw so many sort of places in Akira where that is felt, right? Like if we talk about that power stream, right, that Akira and all the ESP kids and everybody's able to tap into, that is in some ways a temporary autonomous zone. On page 363, when Kyoko just talks about how even though these experiments that were done on us like left us like maimed and left us kind of like nonverbal in many senses, we were able to communicate with each other non-verbally because we are now connected to this stream, right? And like despite the destruction, despite of all of these things, their bonds sort of allow them to meet each other in various intervals like throughout time. And there's even a sense of the timelessness that it offers in that like Kyoko is like reappears as like a young girl that she naturally is. There are glimpses throughout the text, in especially in the earlier chapters, where they see apparitions of Kei and Kaneda before them calling each other, right? Like they physically or psychophysically travel through time through this stream. There's a way in which that these temporary autonomous zones are bubblings up of almost an innate freedom that we have within ourselves. So like it's not that somebody was dictated the role to bring the guitar or dictated the role to bring the drugs or to learn how to cook some like type of food. It is just it's like gumbo, or it's like West African foods and infiltrations that happen in Louisiana from like maroon communities that like fused a bunch of different disparate groups. And because of that, like I don't know, like in indestructible will of the human experience to be free, they're able to create like a unifying order, even if for a moment, right? And so I think that Akira brings some of those themes out pretty directly, but uses maybe psychic abilities and this grand stream and flow of life as a reference to its omnipotence, in the sense that it is just the powers that we are all subject to and the flow of things that we experience. Our will is connected to that. That's my hypothesis, at least. Like our will is connected to that, and no type of hegemonic structure can really crush that out. That guerrilla warfare, it's always going to be there, because everybody who's under the heel of an oppressive group, they're going to sympathize with the people who are at least taking a stand against that shit, right? And society may try to make as many MLK avenues and Malcolm X boulevards across the world, but they really can't dissolve that spirit. They try to subsume it and try to reshape it and reanimate it as a horrible shambling version of itself that fits the hegemonic system, but that spirit never truly dies. And I think that you get that in Akira.
Okay, so the theory that I feel like is animating this whole thing is that like the human spirit or whatever, like the will itself, which is transhumanist, like in its the way that it's just described in certain moments throughout the text, especially by Kyoko, is like indestructible and all powerful, omnipotent. If we can tap into it, like everybody has the ability to tap into it. It's basically that like it cannot be tampered with if you can really tap into it. And then there's this free flow of energy that everyone has access to. But then by the same token, it also seems like the most powerful figures that we have are individuals who have some sort of like destined or experimentally built Tetsuo versus Akira, extra access to this thing. I guess like I come back to this idea of what do those two represent? Do they represent potentially, is it the consolidation of power into individuals? And if so, like, is that necessary for like the not only for the cataclysms to come about that enable the temporary autonomous zones or whatever, but also like, do we need some sort of consolidation of power within certain finite figures in order to see real things come about in the real world, or can we find a covenant with that kind of energy that truly is more dispersed and egalitarian? I guess to say it a different way, it's like, will we always desire leaders in some ways and always kind of desire to be ruled and not to be all powerful? And therefore, is there a necessity for people to take positions of authority and to wield the power that they have when given that?
Right. Like, does the freedom that we see, like, it is our freedom connected to having like a shepherd to lead us to
Yeah.
it, right?
And like a person who is like kind of super powerful. Like, I guess you would think of Tetsuo and Lady Miyako.
Yeah. I think and when I'm looking at the story in broad strokes and how people interacting with each other and with these powers, like it was those power structures crumbling that actually got us to that point. It seems like maybe what's the story that's being told is that you actually have to start with those types of systems in order to destroy them, because if all these superpowers need to butt heads, so that as they're dealing with the big fish, the smaller fish can school and create like bigger, more cohesive liberation structures. I think maybe that's a way of looking at it. But I do see your point in the sense that, like, okay, there needed to be convergence of superpowers in order for peace to actually occur. And maybe in a real life context, if like maybe the US, Russia, and China had like fused together in some way, like we would then have peace amongst ourselves or something like that. But I think I want to resist the thought that naturally, I think this is just, my personality, resist the idea that the all power, like someone needs to be all powerful. But I'm also trying to see that as, yes, power structures always exist, but just because someone is the spokesperson of a group doesn't necessarily mean that they are the most important or the best or the strongest in the group. And I'm looking at Kaneda, where the story isn't called Kaneda, it's called Akira. And Akira, the actual boy, says like 7 things in the entire 6 volumes.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right.
So it's like, while Kaneda might be like our main character, he's not the main character for several books, because Kay is the main character for at least 2 of them. And the way that power maybe shifts hands is more important than the power being consolidated between various entities. And I think I also wanted to step back a second, because when you talked about the dangers of like having the ability to absorb or contain more of that omnipotent power, right? That creates a hierarchy where Akira might be at the top, Tetsuo below Akira on similar planes, then way, way exponentially down. You have the Miyakos, the Takashis, Yokos, the ESP kids, etc. I think that if we look at the way that Miyako described how the powers, like the experimentations worked, right? Where they take the energy, the whatever fluids from your brain, and then re-inject them into your body so that you can manipulate that energy. Maybe it's a cautionary tale about self investment and self-will, where it's like you can try to physically manifest these things, but not only will it maim and destroy a bunch of people, the people who are able to go about and ask and obtain power because of their makeup in one way, shape, or form, actually just leads the world into disrepair, because it's about trying to control ultimate power versus, coexisting with it.
I mean, I think Tetsuo is a great cautionary tale for that.
Yeah.
In a way, you could see this also, like, this whole narrative as like a treatise on like, chaos magic or something. This idea that like everyone has free access to like ultimate power. I mean, I don't know about that though, because again, it seems like Tetsuo is uniquely gifted in this stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but there's an element where maybe people have a. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the real kicker, is that like it seems like Tetsuo is uniquely gifted at this stuff, and some people do come more naturally to it than others, which is probably true of like chaos magic and stuff. If as well, people have natural inclinations towards certain things, but it is also true that like in trying to artificially gain as much power as possible, you do lose yourself, and it also has devastating effects on all those around you. And it does also seem like it's all at the end of it all, you can't escape what your actual traumas are. And like that was the real. It's like the whole spell of like destroying Tokyo and everything was ultimately just resolved by Kaneda saying that like, dude, I always wanted to be your friend. Like she truly is. So, like, this all could have been avoided, my friends,
Right.
But, like,
Truly.
at the same time, yeah. So I guess it just is the idea is that we all do have access to this stuff, and it's like, but it's not like that we should all try to seek as much of it as possible, It's that, yeah, like,
Yeah.
it's that, it's like seeking it in a collective, just like any kind of power. It's like seeking it in a collectivist way is like the method, is the motion.
Right. And I want to also bring in the Kaori and Tetsuo relationship, because it almost seems in some respects that and Kaneda to some extent, you don't really need all of that. That power might be just a means of reacting to a world that is dangerous and scary.
Yeah.
And what the real thing that you want and need is that like ability to be vulnerable, to be loved, to be cared for,
Absolutely.
and not feel so alone. Because I think the thing that I think about power, at least when we're doing these feminist readings of Akira, and when I think about power and maybe physical domination and dominating power and masculinity, like you want that because you have a jealous concept of what it means to live in this world, where you must constantly be defending your property or defending whatever you claim to be your own or that's important to you, almost because you're just afraid that someone's going to rip that away from you, whereas the reality can be much more beautiful if everybody's sharing these things and everybody's caring about each other and caring about the things that other people care about, right? And so yeah, I don't know, but I also see it in some ways that there I don't know, maybe how does this land on you though? Sometimes it seems like looking at Tetsuo, that the only way for him to see this and come to that conclusion is to have to be in power and have that power. Like he's so
right.
insecure that maybe it's impossible for him to see outside of that like need for power. And
I was thinking like, okay, if Kaori were allowed to go back to him and like warn him, and like if they had like like a year, if she had like a year to work her magic on him, would it all have been resolved? Or if Kaneda had been able to sit down and have that conversation and be like, dude, I love you or whatever, would this have been resolved?
Yeah.
And I think that it probably, in a way, probably. But it's also that once he had the power, there was really no going back. Like, once he was going down that route, it seemed like he needed to keep going through it. It was interesting, though, because there was so many times when there was all this combat between him, Kei, Kaneda, etc., that didn't seem like it was trying to be lethal. Like there was all these times that like Kaneda was trying to kill him or about to kill him or whatever, and then didn't because he's like this, and then the same other vice versa too. Like so many times that like he was that Tetsuo was like had the capacity to absolutely crush Kaneda, but didn't, and then it turned into something like, aren't we having fun now? Like, am I? Like it became this discussion about like some sort of game dynamic and some sort of like vengeful hierarchical position or whatever of dominance.
From far away, it seems that I may not be able to, see all the details, but I don't know. There's sand in the cracks, and everything's just a little wet.
This is where like fate, destiny, and stuff come in, because I'm like, because I keep thinking like, you're absolutely right. Would Tetsuo have killed Kaneda if he actually had because he had the chance to multiple times, right? And we're talking about the ability to crush someone's head from like 70 feet away. You know what I mean? Like
it'd be so easy. And
it's
Kaneda doesn't have like psychic abilities necessarily. Like
no psychic abilities at all. And there are moments where like when they're actually physically fighting, like there's some moments where it seems like Tetsuo cannot use his power against Kaneda. Like he's able to use it in some ways, but not like how the fuck did Kaneda punch him in the face? Like grab his vest and like do all these things. And I think when I brought up that time thing, I know I'm running the risk of like spilling all over the place because describing the power is really, really hard.
Yeah.
But there seemed to be in a word a connection between fate and time and the abilities that Tetsuo or any of the kids could use at a given moment. Because for Tetsuo to be Kaneda, please save me, at the moment of before the big cataclysm, right? In the end of the book, like Tetsuo could not have been able to kill him, and to see the shadow forms or like the the flaming spirit forms of Kaneda and Kei in these random places throughout the text, like he had to have gotten to that moment.
Yeah.
So maybe like the stream itself is always flowing. That's neither here nor there. But the point is, he needed to ascertain this power, and potentially his personality type, while give Kaori a year, she might have been able to like coax him out of like this need to like be the strongest. This is where I think Akira comes in, where he keeps being like, moon, like go to the moon, blow up the moon.
Yeah. Like,
and so,
well, if you're an all-powerful person who has at one point like led to who like has all power or whatever, then you probably, if you were like found yourself incarnated in the physical world again, you'd probably have some sense of humor about it. It's like, oh, this is like none of this actually matters, or like so it would be kind of just like and so like but like he does seem like he's ultimately benevolent in a certain way, but in like a trickster way, Akira, I mean. And maybe that in that way he did, like he's like, like you need to experience that you can go to the moon and like fuck up the moon. Like you need to just go like okay, you want to like, do something like crazy, like test it out, buddy, like,
right.
Maybe that is a part of it too. Like however you got to get there to this moment of like reconciliation with all of humanity, the mutant kind. But sometimes you have to do that by going your own route of like unstable apotheosis, But like, and then all those other things become so essential. I think if nothing else, I think the things that are truly the most important, I go back to like the care ethics. I think that's like really important. Like if it had been possible to have like a therapeutic intervention, that probably would have done the same thing as the like giant like Akira explosion thing. But ultimately, would we even want to have? I mean, listen, and then we kind of get into all these cosmic questions because it's like, would we even want to have a world ruled by Tetsuo? If Tetsuo were benevolent, if he were like just trying to like have everyone live a great life, I mean, I certainly would like to say that I would, but then there's kind of the question of like, would people really be down for that? I don't know. Because I think that maybe, and then maybe that points to the idea that like, look, we have the power right now as a civilization, as a global civilization. We have the power to lead whatever kind of life we want, and yet these like hierarchical structures are in place, and it ultimately seems kind of petty. It does seem kind of petty because it's like, what's the reason? Like, why do you want to be rich, right? Why do you want to be rich and other people be poor?
Right.
It's like you can have the same amount of food, the same amount of experiences, the same amount of like sex and stuff. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it really does come down to like things like a feeling of domination, like the ability to buy affection or whatever, and these sort of like this clinging to certain things that you think that you didn't get so far, that you need to get, or that you have and you think you'll lose, if there truly is this like collective like beautiful blossoming of civilization. So maybe it really maybe it does like truly identify like the situation that we're in, where like we have like a childlike all powerful force in the form of like the upper class that's like recklessly spinning out of control, but doesn't want to destroy the lower class, right? Because that would mean then it wouldn't have anyone to play with, right? Then it wouldn't have anyone to exert its dominance over. But then also doesn't want to destroy the world, right? But then is also kind of like isn't able to reconcile its actual like foundational traumas, right? Isn't actually able to look within and be like, you know what, these are actually what I really want, and it's actually way more both vulnerable and maybe silly sounding than one would expect.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on something when you said like isn't able to actually sort of understand what they really want. How difficult is it to want something when you have everything, right? Like if you've got everything at your disposal, including like playthings, wanting something comes about very, very rarely. Sometimes I think about maybe the struggle of like I think about Lady Miyako. If Lady Miyako was as powerful as Akira and as Tetsuo or what have you, would we have an actual benevolent society, right?
Right.
Or would it be a constant sort of like, now that everything is under my control, I need to set up a tiered system of who actually is deserving or worth my training, my clothes, because there's a lot of protection and a lot of, bureaucracy in Lady Miyako's world as well, And so it almost feels like hierarchy is the name of the game, and maybe the only thing to want at that level is hierarchy. I don't know how that lands on you, because I think I'm just trying to grapple with themes of well, if you have everything, like if we look at the American context and you technically have everything, realistically, like why do you want to make life or make the world a worse place for other people just so that you can say that I've got it better than someone else, right? Like, why is that fun? Why is that and in any way gratifying? If not just to have the hierarchy as like a maybe a manifestation of your the reality that you see, right? Like this dog eat dog world or whatever, you have to make it real, and you have the power to make it real to justify your comforts or what have you, right? I'm thinking of like Succession to some extent, right? Where it's like this infighting amongst the family just to try and like usurp the, great
Yeah.
granddaddy who owns the company,
Right.
right?
Whereas like you already have it completely made. And then like I guess, Akira has whatever he wants, but like only in the context of like a apocalyptic world where there's not like really we don't really see any like fine feasts or like wine or anything,
I mean, Nezu is trying to get
Mr.
that stuff,
Nezus.
you know?
Yeah. I don't
He was
know.
like out here trying to be the playboy at the end of the world.
Yeah. No,
No, you don't really see it. No, you don't see it at all. I mean, it's just
but
like he really wanted that shit.
yeah. I guess the point is that I don't know. I think I lost the point. I guess like I really do think that's something to stick with. I do think that's an interesting way to kind of wrap up the discussion. Is like what motivates you when you do have power? What motivates you, and like how basic is it? How basic are these urges towards these irrational urges? Towards domination and um and
Yeah.
control.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add is just maybe inspecting like what type of power you seek, because we talked about the different feminist forms of power that have manifested in this, and ways in which in the end of the world those maybe subtle or less violent means of power actually
Yeah,
take like a much higher role. And so
totally.
as coming into the new year, just being like, what type of power do you want, and like
Yeah.
how do you cultivate it to its finest points?
And I do I think that the different kinds of power can coexist, and I think there's like the collective anti-authoritarian urge and the like urge for speed, and the urge for self-mutation, and the urge for discipline. I'm thinking of all the different big characters we have. There's having relationships and like helping those around you.
Addiction.
Yeah, there's the addictive urge. Like I feel like they can all coexist in this like Neo Tokyo hopeful version 2025 core world where like that's the type of cyberpunk I want to live in, is like one where we have a sense of connection to a network of people and spirits that are wielding those forms of power collectively with unified aims. And so I don't know, that's the feeling of the glimmer of hope I got at the end of reading the book, and I feel like that's something to genuinely try to manifest for us, for our cyberpunk world, is one where we can find a sense of solidarity within it, with different means, but similar cause.
I agree. And I'm very glad, just as a plug to like not really wanting to go to a heaven where I just have to worship all day, which kind of sucks. Like we don't need that, the idea of a utopia that's heavily ordered. Like this cyberpunk world actually just allows you to exist and act freely, and lean into your comforts and proclivities without fear of subjugation, which is nice.
Yeah, and I also like that it's like, I think the knowledge that the larger world is still like trying to oppress you, and it's got so much of the world captured, that that's like part of the world that we can hope for as well, because like we can't hope for anything else.
Right.
So yeah, just part of the calculus. But I think that biking within the streets regardless, learning the routes.
Yeah.
Oh man, you know what? Do you have time to add anything to the Mutant Manifesto? Because it'd be kind of cool if we could grab something here.
Oh yeah.
I kind of
Oh
forgot,
my gosh.
but like I think it's time to return.
It is time. Wow, thank you for bringing us back to Earth. From Neo Tokyo. Yeah, let's dig in. Boy, I feel like one, I have missed, the the manifesto.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everybody, for listening to this series. It was so cool. Thanks for leading it, Josh. I'm really glad to have like time to really sink our teeth into something like this.
Yeah, I really do appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone who wrote along. I know I can lose myself. There's just it's very, very dense. I think I was a little bit ahead of myself, but thank you all again. And yeah, thanks, Jackie. This was awesome.
Oh, it was really cool.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like something went wrong, and that's why we're here. That we're in. Sorry, I got to start over. Sometimes it feels like something went wrong, and that's why we're here, that we're in some kind of cosmic cage or simulated psy-op. We become in the face of simulations and psy-ops, and from wrongness spring. Syncretism is for the honorable and dishonorable alike. In thought and in body, no one, not two, in sky and seed sown, we dream up shadows to love through and hold their calloused hands, shaping change in the nether pool from breath to breath, and coming up again and again, seeking vistas of freedom. We embody a haunted perspective and witness the chaos from above. The mutant spirit lives among us. Learn from the labyrinths in breathing mountains. How do you look, and where are you looking? Note when you're stuck. Put sugar on your tradition pills and record before breaking. How's that feel to rot with glee, to decay with me? Like the process of radioactive decay in unstable atoms, degeneration yields a more sustainable nature.
You drive a car. I'll hold the rifle.